Hi everyone, it's Anand from Finance Fix here. So what do you do when you no longer want something or need something that you currently own? For me, it could be this jacket, for example. Really nice, but I no longer need it. I have a simple system to sell things that I no longer want or need. And if it does sell, I make money. And if it doesn't sell, then I've proven it won't sell, it won't make money, and then I'll do the next best thing with it. In this video, I'll tell you how I do it. My hope is that you'll pick up some tips in this video on how to create extra space in the home by getting rid of things that you no longer need or want. You'll probably get a bit of money back for your old stuff and avoid consigning everything simply to the bin. The other thing is, when something does sell, I get a great deal of satisfaction knowing that someone else is getting use out of something that I no longer need. And it's helping someone out. If it just sat in a cupboard somewhere gathering dust or in a corner of my home, then actually it wouldn't be getting use. That person who needs it somewhere else in the world is not finding it. So it's actually hurting two people. Me because I'm hoarding it, and that other person who's not getting access to the thing they want and need. And by the way, whenever I list things, most of the time things do sell. It's very rare that something doesn't sell within my time frame. And even when it doesn't, I've got a way to deal with it even then. So I've sold a bunch of varied and different things over the years. They range from an old heavy white sink that was left in the garden from a property I once bought, a fitted office desk which we carefully took off the wall from my old home before we sold it, to simple things like clothing for women, for men, for children. I've sold old sofas before, scooters, old satellite dishes, baby baths, antique mirrors. I've got a few more written down here. Lego sets, sewing machines, pushchairs, old curtains, old broadband routers. I've sold old light fixtures before. I've sold a chin-up bar, a car, and even a garage door. And I've made everything from £5 to over £500 for something else. In fact, I sold one second-hand item for £650. That is all excluding the car, of course. That went for multiple thousands. And aside from that car, I don't really keep a track of how much I make from all this. It's all really just pocket change. But it's all a useful learning exercise in how to sell, how to negotiate, how to deal with time wasters, knowing when to walk away from a negotiation, learning how to write marketing copy, and of course, learning how to seal the deal. Now let's come back to that old satellite dish, for example. That is a really good example of something I've sold that I didn't really have any use for at all. It could have just gone in the bin or probably given to the engineers that came to install my new satellite dish. Let me talk you quickly through how that worked. So I had a renewal coming up for my TV satellite subscription, and tech had moved on, so the company offered me a new set-top box, but that needed, to work properly, it needed a new satellite dish installed as well. Now typically what happens is on the day of the install, engineers come around, install the new dish, take away the old dish and scrap it. But me being me, having faith in my second-hand sales approach and doing some quick online research on the saleability of an old satellite dish, I knew I could get a good deal. So I advised the engineers that I'd be retaining that old dish. So I popped into the garden with the old dish, took out my phone and took 4 quick photos of that satellite dish. I took the photos of different angles of the dish, the front, the back, to show them where the connector was, and the photograph of the sticker that was on it to show people what model that particular satellite dish was. I drafted up a quick title, which took me all of a second. Satellite dish is what I called it, funnily enough, because I figured that if someone is searching for a satellite dish, that's probably what they're going to put into a search bar on one of these marketplaces I'm about to talk about. They're not going to get too specific on that initial search. In the description, again, it's quite simple. I wrote the colour of the dish, the size of the dish, why I was selling it, and included the price. And as I'd already done my research, knowing that these dishes went in the region of £20 to £30, I put a price tag of £25 on it, knowing that I could negotiate down to £20 from there. In reality, I knew I didn't really have a need for this dish any longer, and so I didn't really mind going even lower than £20. So typically when I'm selling something, I have a title, a short description, photos of the relevant parts of the item I'm selling, and I have a price in mind. Once that's in place, then I go to a list of 4 specific places online where I can list my item for free. The first place I go to is Facebook Marketplace, knowing the size of the audience that Facebook has. The second place I go to straight after that is Gumtree, which is kind of a Craigslist for the UK and other places outside of the US. The third place is Nextdoor, which is a local neighborhood app. And the fourth and final one I typically use is a place called Shpock, SHPOCK. I'll leave some links of these sites in the description below. Now the beauty is I typically use the same title and description and photographs in each of these 4 places. So I'm minimizing effort. I do all that stuff just once and then I copy and paste across all the different sites. I like using these 4 sites and I've made sales across all 4 when some haven't worked in some particular sites. And that's usually because each of them caters to a slightly different audience. And because I want my item to get as much exposure as possible over a short period of time, this works out pretty well. I keep my listing live for 4 to 8 weeks across all of these 4 sites, renewing my listings for free when required. Now, depending on what you're selling, the number of inquiries you can get can be dramatically different from each other. Some of those inquiries will be serious, some of those not so much. The ones you want are the ones that are serious and the ones that can conclude the deal quickly, collect the item, give you the cash and take that item away. You should also be aware of some of the inquiries that you get that are not so serious or can sometimes be unhelpful. I find that some of the inquiries that are not serious typically ask for an item to be posted, even when collection only is present in the description. Or sometimes they want to pay in a different way than has been mentioned on the post. Rather than just cash or instant bank transfer at the time of collection, they want to pay by PayPal or postal order or check. And yes, checks do still exist. Most people that ask for an item to be posted also offer to pay for postage, but I almost never say yes to these. Simply because I don't have the relevant packaging materials at home, I don't want to go off and buy them, and really I don't want the hassle. Not all of these will be scammers, mind you. Some of them might perhaps live very far away and not make the trip to you worthwhile. Or they might not have access to decent transportation or might not be able to travel for other reasons. But again, I'm looking for simplicity and ease. I want the item gone from my home, I want some cash for it, but I don't want to take on a lot of hassle to get rid of it either. And as I said earlier, sometimes I get the odd request to pay by a different method, PayPal for example, and I always say no here too. Because again, if it's cash on collection, then handing over cash and giving them the item is pretty simple. And if the amount is high enough, I might even accept bank transfer at the time of collection. So it has to clear in my account on my banking app before I hand the item over. So again, that's pretty simple. I've had issues before with PayPal chargebacks. PayPal chargebacks can cause hassles down the line as well, so that's another reason why I steer clear of these. If after 8 weeks I've had no sales and no legitimate inquiries that were even close to concluding a deal, then it's time to take the next step, and that is admitting to yourself that selling this item is probably not going to work. This is when donating that item to a charity becomes a viable option. I'm happy to now put the item in the bin because I've given it time to prove that no one wants or needs this item, no one is searching for it, so I'm satisfied that I can dispose of it as a last resort. Now, I've sold a myriad of things second hand over the years, and though I haven't tracked it, I'd take a pretty solid guess that I've sold over 80% of the items I've listed using this method. And all of that has of course brought in unexpected cash with fairly minimal effort. And I know there are some of you that will be saying there are more than those 4 places you could list things, but I know these 4. I've used them, I've tried them, I've tested them. I've left links in them in the show notes below just in case some of you haven't tested them and want to check them out. I find these 4 are very simple. They have big audiences, they're simple to list, simple to use, simple to exchange messages on with prospective buyers, and ultimately they've all really been effective, so I've not really needed to look elsewhere. Have you had experience with these 4? Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, Shpock, and Nextdoor. What tips would you have? If you've got any tips that you might give first-time listers in any of these 4 sites, then please do leave a comment below. I'm a big fan of learning from each other and each other's experiences. For me, the way I do it is, number 1, take good photographs. If you're selling a DVD, for example, 1 photo might work. But if you're selling a pair of old trainers, this might not work. And if you're selling a car, for example, like I did a few years ago, then 1 photo is definitely not going to cut it. I took something like 15 photographs, different angles, the back, the sides, the front, the internals of the car to really give the prospective buyers a good idea of what that car looked like. So again, the number of photos depends on the item you're selling, but try and take really good photos. Anything with today's smartphones should be more than enough. You don't need any specialist equipment. The way to think about it is, if I was buying this item, how many photos would I expect in this listing? Number 2, search for the item you're trying to sell or the type of item you're trying to sell on these marketplaces. This will do 2 things. It will give you a good idea of the prices that other sellers are listing these items for, and it will also give you a good idea of the titles they're using for describing the item and the description they're using and the type of details that they're using in their description to see if you're being thorough enough in your description for potential buyers. That's not to say copy them, mind, but it will give you a good idea of what to include and not to include in your own listing. Number 3, if you're anything like me, I don't like getting bombarded with texts or calls about items I no longer care about and I just want to make some quick money on them and get them out of my home. So I only use the messaging platforms on these listing marketplaces to engage with prospective buyers. So Facebook Messenger, for example, for Facebook Marketplace, or Nextdoor's equivalent messaging system for their listing marketplace. That means I might miss out on some interest, but it's a conscious choice I'm making for the hassle it can create in my life. Tip number 4 is make sure you check your listings regularly, at least once a day. This will ensure you can get to interested buyers quickly and offer collection times quickly as well. Number 5, and this might seem like a bit of an odd one, but remember to negotiate strongly, but not too strongly. What I mean by this is negotiate well, but remember, you don't really need these things anymore. You don't really want these things anymore. It's better to get something than nothing, and then just binning that item in a few weeks anyway. Before listing an item, I know my choices are list it on a marketplace for a couple of weeks. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to give it to charity, and if that doesn't work, then I'm going to the rubbish tip to bin the item. The latter being a last resort. So in my satellite dish example from earlier, actually my only options were listing it, seeing if it sells, and then the rubbish tip. Because not a lot of people go to charity shops to search for old satellite dishes. Surprising, I know. Tip number 6, if you're not getting any interest in the first 1 or 2 weeks, try lowering your price point. Tip number 7, give each listing a fixed timeline, something between 4 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks if you really want. And this is because I find it's way too easy keeping that item in the fading hope of one day in the near future, you might just sell it to someone who's interested. I give it 6 to 8 weeks. If it doesn't sell, it's out of here. Now, having said that, ultimately how long you keep it and keep it for sale and in the hope of one day selling it depends on what the item is, of course. I had a faulty microwave I previously listed for parts, but I wouldn't keep that around for more than a week. But for the car I sold a few years ago, I'd happily wait more than 8 weeks perhaps before I did something else with it. And plus, it's not really likely that my next step is to donate the car to a charity if it doesn't sell within 8 weeks. So as you can see, it really does depend on the item. But as a general rule of thumb, 8 weeks max is what I tend to go for because I don't want to hang on to something on the off chance that I might sell it one day. Anyway, that's about enough of me banging on about 8 weeks. I hope you've liked that video, hope it's been helpful to you. Let me know how all this goes for you. And if you think I've missed a tip that would benefit others, then leave a comment below. I look forward to reading what you've got to say, and I'll see you on the next video.